The definition of a support system is having a network of people that can provide you with practical or emotional support. For some people, that support system means family, parents, a spouse, or siblings. For others, that can mean friends, a pastor, coworker, or mentor. Having a support system means that you have people in your life to rely on when you need them the most. For Alixandra Moyer, Integrated Marketing Specialist at Phoenix Contact, her support system was already in the making before she was even born. She's here today to share her story of adoption and why she is grateful for a strong support system. So welcome, Allie.
Thank you so much for having me, Wanda.
Yeah, great to have you.
Thank you.
Before we jump into your story, because I'm excited for you to share your story today, tell us a little bit about what you do at Phoenix Contact.
So as you said, I'm an integrated marketing specialist, so I'm like the liaison between our DC team and our integrated marketing team. So I've been here for a little over 2.5 years. I'm not the newest, but I'm still new to Phoenix Contact, so it's a great change to be in this engineering and manufacturing space. That's a new industry for me. I've learned a lot in 2.5 years, and I'm looking forward to sticking around to continue to learn more.
Great. We're talking about a strong support system today, and hopefully you've come to know as a part of the Phoenix family that you've got a strong support system here
Always.
With us. So
Yes.
We're excited for that. And as I mentioned in the opening, your story actually begins before you were even born. So share that with us.
Yeah, I mean, to be able to give you a full scope of my adoption journey, I really got to take it back to the very beginning. So it starts out a little grim, to be honest. We're going to take it back to 1989. So my biological mother, was living in inner city Philadelphia, Pennsylvania at the time, and was very much involved in drugs, selling drugs, using drugs, just not a very healthy and safe lifestyle. So when she found out that she was pregnant with me, as I've been told, she was actually selling drugs to have an abortion. So not great news that you want to start out learning, but it's part of my narrative. That's the truth. Yeah. And she's had prior, criminal history, even 4 or 5 years before that. So all throughout the 80s, it's just not a great time in her life, right? And I understand and acknowledge that. At this time too, my biological father passes away before I was born as well. So when I was born on January 25th, 1990, I was immediately placed in foster care at that time because my biological mother was in jail.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an incredible story. I can only imagine if she would have had a stronger support system, what a difference that would make in her life today too.
Yes.
But you're here today.
Yes.
And we are grateful for that. So tell us what happens next.
Yeah, of course. So when I say my mom and dad, I'm referring to the people that adopted me, Harry and Elizabeth Moyer. Okay. So when I say mom and dad, that's what I'm talking about. So my mom gets a call a day or two after I was born. And, this is the foster care agency in Philadelphia. And they say, we have a baby that was just born and has been placed in foster care. Do you accept or deny, bringing her into your home? And how much of a swipe right, swipe left does that sound like? Accept or deny, maybe like a meeting request.
Right.
But my parents were foster parents for 10 years at the time. And my mom, Beth, has a very long history in the nursing field and emergency care. She's always had a passion for taking care of the needy, but wanted to open up this realm of infants versus like adults and people who are like in the end of life stage. Okay. So she gets the phone call and she's like, well, let me come down to Philadelphia and I'll meet her. And as she will describe, when I wrapped my little finger or wrapped my little hand around her finger and my brown eyes matched her brown eyes, she said she fell in love instantly and the rest is history. So I was placed with the Moyer family when I was 5 days old.
Wow.
Yeah, right away.
That's amazing.
Right away.
Yeah, because that doesn't always happen in the foster care system. So
yeah,
that was great that she was already lined up to step in.
She says it was fate.
Yeah.
That's true. And they weren't sure how long I was going to be placed with them because the primary goal of the foster care agencies is to reunite the biological family members with the child, reunification.
Okay.
So the biological family members, whether it was my biological mom or an aunt or a cousin, somebody who was, safe, they wanted to match that. But until then, it was always going to be placed with the Moyer family. But the amount of time was a big unknown.
Yeah.
For as long as it took, really. We weren't sure at that time how long it was going to be.
What a process. And you're with the Moyers, and obviously you're beginning to grow and life is taking place for you. When do you realize, at what age do you realize that you're adopted and that there's another possible set of parents out there, or there's somebody else out there that is still kind of making up your life, so to speak?
Yeah.
When does that become, or when are you aware of that?
Yeah, I was really young. I would say at the age of 3, I was starting to ask questions, maybe even 4 years old. I've always known that I was a foster child. Like, that wasn't hidden to me just because we were working with a foster care team, like caseworkers and other social workers. So they were very apparent in our lives, definitely big advocates for our family. And as I became a little bit older, maybe like 5 or 6 years old, I became very close with my caseworker. She taught me how to do my first cartwheel. She would be passing out pieces of cake at my birthday parties. So she very much felt like an extended family member. And as I was growing up, I was always feeling very frustrated and fearful that I would be taken away from my mom and dad and big brothers, because there was always this looming sense of, this is temporary, this is not permanent. Yeah. We want to get my biological mom, out of jail and into a safe home or environment or whatever that means for her. So there was always that looming fear of, I could be taken away. But my family, even my big brothers, while they might not have enjoyed changing diapers so much, they very much called me, their baby sis. So I would go along with them to football games, and we would go on trips together just as if I was a family member organically. Yeah. There was never a time where I felt like I was othered or anything like that. Mom and dad were always mom and dad, and my big brothers were my big brothers. Yeah. So I ended up being in foster care for 6.5 years, which is not normal. Normally with an adoption process, they want that to start much sooner and much faster. Yeah. And my parents they would have adopted me much sooner if they could, but because my biological mom wanted to have what I think a sense of control, she had the right of way, and she did not want me to be adopted for whatever reason. I don't know to this day. I just know that she was taking a long time to decide to either place me up for adoption or, claim rights in a sense. But she never showed up for any visits. I had one phone conversation with her in my entire life. So she wasn't engaged. So after a while, we definitely needed to put a catalyst on the adoption process, but even that took a year's time. Yeah. So that's why I was so old, even though I was with the family since I was 5 days old, I don't know any other family. Yeah.
And I want to go back to something you said there. You began to realize at the age of 3, which is a very young, tender age, and then the fears start creeping in. Now, you've got a really good support system behind you. You've got this family, the Moyer family, who have brought you into their home. You have your caseworker. You have some other people in your life that are starting to come in. But how did you get through those fears? Because that's a lot to overcome at such a young age.
My mom and dad were very nurturing to me, and they knew that they had to be, because I was considered, an at-risk youth. Okay. So even though I was drug-induced in vitro, and, a lot of the other foster children were drug-exposed in vitro, and then, as they were getting older, we were all predominantly from the inner city Philly area and were considered at risk. So they knew that they needed to pay extra special attention and give special care, just because they weren't sure how I was going to turn out. Yeah. So in terms of just health-wise, the doctor's appointments, regularly scheduled visits, But honestly, a lot of hugs and a lot of kisses and a lot of snuggles, just really giving me a sense of protection and making me feel loved and cared for was huge. I definitely think that healthy home life and environment and stability. Luckily for me, I didn't have to roam from home to home to home to other agencies and things like that. So I was able to stay with the Moyer family the entire time for the most part. But just that environment and that love, I think, really made an impactful difference in my entire life, even through adulthood. They definitely had to be very proactive, even from a cultural sense of making sure that I was established with an identity of who I was. Because, physically I look different from them, so giving me a sense of belonging and even just making sure that I was feeling heard and understood. Our caseworker team was phenomenal. They were the voice for me that I didn't have quite yet.
Yeah.
Little did they know I started talking early. So, it's all in due time. But it really did take a village to make sure that I felt welcomed and safe and loved and cared for. And that really was impactful for my entire life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to focus on the importance of that support system because, you talk about nurturing. They nurtured you. They were there for you. They hugged you. They provided that comfort for you. And that's something that we all need, even as we get older in life. And I sometimes feel maybe even as we get a little bit older, when things start to change in our lives, when we have, maybe there's a loss of a job or a loss of a family member, those are all very big, deep fears. And who do we have to turn to help support us through that time? Because we all need somebody to turn to and help support us. So finding those individuals in our lives who will help nurture us and keep us kind of safe, so to speak, on our path in the journey until we get through that period of time, like the storm, so to speak, and we come out on the other side.
Yeah. It definitely was a process just because, again, we still didn't know how long I would be with the Moyer family. So my parents did as much as they could, as fast as they could, to make sure that they gave me an understanding that there is another way to life. In a sense, I could have a healthy start, and that's the normal way to live. Even just with education, they would, get me tutoring, and we would do college for kids programs, and I could embrace like my creative side or my STEM side and just really develop all of those kind of key developmental rudimentary elements as to the development process as I grow. Because to say that I would be taken away to a biological family member that may not have access to the same resources, they wanted to do as much for me as possible while I was with them, just in case I was no longer with them in a couple weeks, a couple months. So it was always TBD, and that would cause, nightmares when I was a kid. I would cry, and I didn't understand why they couldn't make my adoption process happen. Now they're grown-ups. I didn't quite understand then why it was taking so long. So I think once I started getting to school and they really were like, all right, we need to light a fire under somebody's what to get going with this, because it's been long enough now.
Good. Before we jump ahead to the next, what you're going to talk about next, you wrote a book about your journey of adoption called Alixandra's Adoption Announcement. And wow, what a packed full little book. Been enjoying this since the day that I think you had announced it about a year or so ago. I was like, I have to get this book, but it really is great. And the one thing that you mentioned in the book is your family isn't your only source of support. Find people who understand your unique situation and know when to educate those who don't. So in this book, you talk about your caseworker being your supportive system, you're part of your support group, your family, obviously, your big brothers.
Of course.
But you also talk about a few other people, like the judge. So how did the judge play a role in your support system?
Yeah, so Judge Esther Sylvester is her name, so very easy to remember. She was fantastic. I think once we got towards that end stage of the adoption process, she made me feel very comfortable, and I learned that you call her Your Honor. So it was just kind of exciting to be in a big city and to see all these fancy people around me. You know, I'm 6 years old at the time. And she would ask me a lot of questions about, you know, is this something that you want? And making sure that my voice was heard loud and clear. And I always said, of course I want to be adopted. I always said, yes, 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 I want to be adopted. I want to be a Moyer. We had the opportunity to even change my name. I was actually born Danielle.
Okay.
Danielle. But we decided to change my name just because I wanted to give my sense of self like a fresh identity. And thank goodness for my Aunt Cherie, who came up with the name Alixandra. Otherwise, I think I might have been called Indigo or Winter Sky.
Okay.
And I told my mom I don't want to be named after the weather. It was the day I was born.
Okay.
So Alexandra was here to stay. Just with the unique spelling with the I, because my mom wanted to be different.
It's a beautiful name.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the judge, she was great, asked a ton of questions, was very light and happy. And it's always nice to be a part of a success story.
Yeah.
You know, oftentimes judges and social workers, they're always involved when it's the worst of times.
Yeah.
In this case, it didn't turn out to be a worse time. It ended up being one of the best days of my life.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so amazing. You also, in your book, acknowledge one of your mentors, Floyd Stokes. I do know him from a local perspective.
Awesome.
But he gave you encouragement, opportunity, mentorship, and guidance to showcase your adoption story. Tell us a little bit about that interaction.
Yeah, so spoiler, I was adopted.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about here today.
Right.
So as a memento, my mom and I did a project together, which is the original Alexandra's adoption announcement here on the table. So this was actually created as a kit. You know, you could pick it up at a department store, you could illustrate your own pages, you could write your own story, you send it off to a publishing house, and they give you however many copies you want back. So this is a product of that. You know, my grandma got one, like I had some, like some family members just have copies. There's only a few left. And I read this story for a diversity event that the American Literacy Corporation was hosting. It was a Reading 365 initiative in 2022, or 2021 through 2022. So I read this story on April Fool's Day, and Floyd was playing a joke on everybody who tuned in on the call. And you know, there's such a wide audience that particular day versus other days, so there was a lot of people there. And when I read this story, even our Dauphin County Commissioner was on the call, and Floyd and I spoke together, and they're like, all right, we need to get this book published for real, because this book has always just been sitting in a dresser drawer. You know, it was just a keepsake for the experience that my family could enjoy from time to time, but it's been collecting dust. So when I decided to pull it out and read the story for a children's initiative, it really captivated a lot of people on that call. And I never really thought about publishing it for real, because it was just something very personal to me. But I'm so thankful I did, because there have been a lot of people I've met over the past year or so, hundreds of families that have felt the impact from my story. And a lot of foster moms have felt encouraged and hopeful and excited, like there's somebody like us. So I'm so glad that I took the leap, and Floyd really, we got to know each other very well, and he really helped connect me with the right process, connect me with the right people, the editing, putting it all together. And Dauphin County's Children and Youth Office actually was a financial supporter and bought like 400 copies. So it's been an amazing impact.
Yeah, and you are, you do a lot of speaking engagements.
I do.
You have a great voice for this particular topic of adoption, and being a voice for the children and youth that have to go through this process. What are some of the questions that you get from some of the parents who who are fostering or adopting, what are some of the insights that they're looking for from you?
There's definitely a lot of common questions that I get. One of them being, would you ever want to meet your biological mother one day? So that's a big question I get asked all the time. And I think I would. I feel, I'm in my 30s now. It's been 27 years since I've been adopted. And now that I feel more grounded in my life, I think every adopted kid just has some general questions about like, hey, where do I come from? What's my medical history? I don't know any of that. I know there's DNA kits and stuff out there now, but I would just love to hear her story. I acknowledge that, in the 80s and in the 90s, it was a terrible time of her life, and she couldn't afford to support me in the way that I needed. So I don't hold anything against her, but I would just love to have a general knowledge of, my sense of identity before, before even my biological father. I don't really know anything about him other than his name and where he lived at the time. So just some natural curiosities I think I would like to know.
Absolutely.
But on the same token too, I don't want to invite chaos into my life. I don't know her. She's a stranger to me. If I walked past her on the street, I would never know who she was. So while I feel very happy and happy-go-lucky now, I don't want to invite chaos into my life. So I think it's just maybe a more cautious approach. But of course, if the opportunity presented itself, I would love to re-meet her again, just to see that everything turned out okay and safe. Another big question I get is about the transracial adoptee process. So I'm African American, my family is Caucasian. What sort of steps did they take to help give me a sense of identity and how to deal with racism and microaggressions and things like that when I'm with my family and when I'm on my own? So even as a kid, they had to be very proactive in having diverse toys like Barbies that had different skin shades and toys that had different skin shades, even with the foods I would eat, or going to places like churches that I could see more people that look like me and just from other nationalities. Because growing up in central Pennsylvania at the time, we lived in Lebanon, it wasn't as diverse then as it is today. So really just making those extra efforts, learning about Kwanzaa and what does that mean, choosing to recognize it if we wanted to. So all of those sorts of things I think played a huge part in getting a sense of who I was, because when I was like preschool age, that's when other kids are telling you, you look different. You look dirty because you're brown. So how do you handle those situations? How does my mom keep it calm and talk to me about what melanin is? What does racism look like? How do I handle that? How do we handle that as a family? And how do I handle that when I'm by myself? Especially as a kid and then getting older. So all of those things made a huge impact in trying to give me the tools the best that they could. Now today, a lot of adoption agencies have much more resources now because we have internet. We don't just have the public library, but we have other families that you can connect with more easily. There's videos, there's articles, there's such a buffet of options that you can read and brush up on certain topics that we have today that she wasn't privy to, in the early to mid 90s. So it's much better now. So those two big questions are what I get the most.
But that's great that it sounds like they were aware of that these were the things that they, knew that you would need, wanted to make sure that you got that, to say, okay, yes, you are a little bit different, but you're still part of our family and you're loved very much. And, working through that process of what other people are looking at you from an external point of view.
There's always moments of adversity that we had to kind of hurdle over. My parents are significantly older than my peers' parents, so I kind of grew up with the age of grandparents in a sense. Even my brothers are 16, 19, and 22 years older than I am. So just that age and generational gaps was a big moment of adversity, other than race. But caseworkers and, from Philadelphia, they were telling my family, we want our foster babies to stick with their own kind, meaning that they wanted me to be placed with Black families, and that's where I belonged.
Okay.
Obviously, my mom's like, she clapped back. Knowing my mom, she will clap back, because she's like, I don't really care what color these foster babies are, if they're yellow, if they're blue, if they're Black, if they're white. She really just wanted girls, to be honest. She said that she's had enough with boys. She's had 3 boys, all very young. So she's like, I just want some female energy.
Aww.
So I always make the joke that my mom had to buy a girl to get one because she's had all boys, bless her heart. And just with the strong connections that we have too.
Yeah.
So there's always going to be those moments of turmoil, but there's also moments of triumph. And we choose to focus on the moments of triumph, but while still acknowledging those moments of turmoil and how to handle them in a healthy way.
Yeah, I love how you said that. It is really focusing on what is going to get you through that moment, and staying positive, and then having that nurturing, somebody come beside you, whether that's a therapist, a pastor, a friend, a parent, another sibling, but finding that right person that's going to lift you up when you need it the most. I love this one thing that you write about in your book. I'm going to read it.
Of course.
One of the themes of the book is to acknowledge that love presents itself in any color or in any generation. Allie's parents are traditionally the ages of grandparents, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
So right there is a generational gap. Like you said, you have brothers that are, almost 20 years older than you. That's a different generation. That's a different, a difference between like a baby boomer or a Gen Z, or that type of thing.
Exactly.
But that love overall is what presents itself.
Yes.
And it sounds like you got a lot of love, which is great. Did you receive any therapy as you were going through that process?
Not any formal therapy that I remember.
Okay.
I'm sure there were maybe psychological questions that might have been weaved in there that's therapeutic. I wouldn't be able to identify it now.
Okay.
But in terms of like technique or style from social workers, caseworkers, it really was just about the quality time and really getting to know me and understand me separately from my family.
Okay.
So even though I was young, I was still pretty mature for my age. I think I had to grow up a little bit quicker just because of the dynamic of what was going on. So if it was, coloring and coloring books and talking and asking questions, that was a tactic maybe that worked. But it was always, positive responses.
Yeah.
But any sort of formal therapy or counseling, I don't recall anything.
Okay. And the reason I ask that is because, that's one of the things that Phoenix Contact looked at over the last, couple years, and why we partnered with Lyra Health for the mental health benefits for employees and dependents and spouses, because, if you don't have anyone to turn to, we want to make sure that you have somewhere you can go. And that's so important.
Yes.
And, what would you say to somebody who is maybe struggling to find a support system, or isn't able to connect with someone, or maybe, doesn't have family in their life anymore? When parents have passed away, don't have any siblings. What would you encourage them to do?
Well, for starters, I definitely echo your sentiment about the Lyra Health system and the platform that we at Phoenix Contact have free access to, really.
Yeah.
There are so many resources and links and people and phone numbers and articles out there that can really help get you on the path to find what you're looking for. So definitely I recommend tapping into Lyra Health anytime, just and browse what is offered, which is a whole litany of options out there.
Yeah.
But for other people who may not necessarily work here or trying to find other support systems, I think you just have to connect with what you're really looking for and find healthy avenues and ways to achieve that.
Yeah.
So if you want to connect with people that's maybe not family, and trying to make new friends, I'm sure there are a lot of different organizations out there. There's a lot of different community events going on. Google is your friend.
Yeah.
There's definitely a lot of ways to search and find the right people. in your area or that have a community of practice to do what you like.
Yeah.
So even if it's like sports or something fun outside like physical activities, even just if you want somebody to talk to because you're dealing with grief, we have a pretty big support system here, and I'm sure that there are a lot of avenues to get you what you need.
Good. Yeah. So I want to jump back to your adoption day.
Yes.
Or as what some people say, gotcha.
Some people say gotcha day.
Gotcha day.
Yeah.
You now celebrate 2 birthdays.
I do.
Yeah. That's
I do.
awesome.
Yes. So July 29th, 1996 was the big day, and that was the day I became adopted.
Okay.
So we call it my adoption birthday. So it's just a fun day, throughout the year, once a year that my family recognizes as like a special day. I still get presents. Sometimes my mom gets me a little tchotchke or something sentimental. But it's always a special day in our hearts that we'll never forget. It was just such a long journey to get there. Luckily, it was worth the wait to have a celebratory occasion. So we do call it my adoption birthday.
I feel like we should add a 3rd day in there when you start it with the Phoenix family, because I feel like that's a gotcha day.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I think you should add a 3rd birthday.
Awesome.
A 3rd day of celebration.
I think we have a 3-tiered cake somewhere around here too. So we should find out where that is.
Yeah. So you do share this in your book, but tell us what your mom did to announce your adoption.
She wanted to put it in the newspaper.
Okay.
So she, I think, worked with like the Lebanon Daily News and did like a little announcement, almost like a baby announcement or an engagement announcement. I don't know if they still do that anymore. But at the time, that was big news, and she'd shout it from the rooftops if she could.
Well, that just seals it even more of how much they loved you and how much they wanted you, and to just announce it to everyone, like, hey, look what we got. We got Allie.
That's right.
And that's such an amazing reward, I guess.
Yes.
For lack of better words. But
yeah.
So you are a motivational speaker. You talk about adoption. November is National Adoption Awareness Month.
It is.
And that's another thing that Phoenix Contact did for 2023 was not only made changes to our parental leave policy, adding more days and time for parents to connect with babies and children, because that's important, but also adding the adoption benefit as well, which is so key, because it's unfortunate that it can be a little costly to do something, to want to extend your love to somebody else who needs it so much. But the importance of having that benefit in place to help parents out to get that in the process.
Yeah, I think that's a phenomenal resource that we have here. And wow, what a blessing.
Yeah.
Because to have a family doesn't always have to look like biological. I don't look like my parents, although my mom says I have her eyes, and I have my dad's laugh. But families don't have to match to be a family.
Yeah.
And if you have a happy and healthy and loving home that you want to nurture, foster kids, or even kids who are maybe getting ready to age out of the foster care agencies, then I would definitely encourage people to want to adopt if they can.
Yeah.
So I know that I've been blessed and felt very lucky and have so much gratitude for the Moyer family extending their love to me as if it were organic, and I think that's just how it always has felt. So if there's anybody out there that's even considering adoption or has adopted, I always love meeting people with that journey and hearing stories. I think it's a fantastic experience and opportunity.
That's wonderful. I want to read one more thing out of your book. This is not a spoiler alert, so
we know what happens at the end.
You want to get the book. Don't tell them. So when I think about what a family means to me, it means having and giving love and support no matter who you are. Thankfully, I get lots of hugs and kisses every single day and all of the care you can imagine. And I think that really stuck out to me, because we can get that type of support from anyone, like you said.
That's right.
If we don't have, I come from a traditional family. I know where I came from and that support system, but I wasn't really connected that close with my parents.
Mhm.
So there were other people in my life that became that support system. And not to say that they weren't there, but they weren't at the level that maybe,
Right.
I needed at the time.
Right.
But having that additional support come from other people is really key and really
Yeah.
important. And you should reach out if you need help and you need that support.
Of course, support systems, it can be a whole big village. It doesn't just have
Yeah.
to be family. It's your friends like family.
Yeah.
It's the pets that you have and take care of. It's your coworkers if you're close. It can be your church family.
Yeah.
It can be the people that you hang out with, and get drinks with. It can be so many different types of people.
Yeah.
So just having that benefit of having a multitude of people there for you and that can catch you when you're falling and can lift you up when you're rising is amazing.
Good. And you have another support system joining you. You have a big event happening next year.
Uh-oh.
Spoiler alert.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Okay.
That's right.
Getting there.
That's right.
That's awesome.
So my family's growing, of
Yep.
course. After I was adopted, my parents did get divorced, so I have a stepmom and a stepdad. So I can't imagine life without them either. I have nephews now. Unfortunately, my oldest brother did pass away, but his nephews are definitely living to his legacy, so that's been amazing to watch them grow as well.
Good.
Godchildren, my fiance's family will be a big part of my family, so we just keep multiplying. So that's a
for
good
you.
thing. It's exciting time for us for sure.
Good. So happy for you.
Thank you.
And grateful that you are here with us and sharing your story, because I think it's really important that people hear that. So
Thank you.
can you tell everybody where they can go find the book and how they can follow you in your journey?
Yes, absolutely. So my book is available on Amazon for download on Kindle, but there's also that paperback version. But also I have a website, alixandramoyer.com. Just watch that spelling. It's Alixandra, Moyer.com. So you can definitely follow me on Facebook, because I do a lot of speaking engagements and events in the community, like cultural fairs and other kind of book signings and things like that. So please feel free to follow, like, reshare, repost. Give me a high five when you see me at work. I love to meet all sorts of people.
Wonderful, wonderful. So go out, get the book by Ali. You will not be disappointed. Follow her. She's a great person, a great friend, coworker, and a great support person. So if you have any questions about adoption, feel free to reach out, and Ali will support you in that journey. So thank you very much.